Question 1. The investigation demonstrates that Ms. Anya Sharma, a candidate for admission to Alanus University, has submitted an application that includes strong academic transcripts and a compelling personal statement. However, a preliminary review by an admissions officer noted a perceived lack of cultural fit based on the applicant's extracurricular activities, which differ significantly from those of previously admitted students from similar academic backgrounds. The admissions officer is considering recommending the application for rejection based on this subjective assessment, despite Ms. Sharma meeting all stated academic entry requirements, which approach best aligns with the regulatory framework and ethical guidelines for university admissions at Alanus University. Option A. Recommend Ms. Sharma's application for immediate acceptance, overriding the standard review process, due to the potential positive impact of her unique background on the university's diversity metrics. Option B. Proceed with a thorough and objective evaluation of Ms. Sharma's application, assessing all components against the published admission criteria and documenting the rationale for the final decision. Option C. Reject Ms. Sharma's application due to the perceived lack of cultural fit, as determined by the admissions officer's subjective assessment of her extracurricular activities. Option D. Request additional, non-academic information from Ms. Sharma specifically to justify her cultural fit with the university, beyond what is required by the standard application. The correct answer is C. Reject Ms. Sharma's application due to the perceived lack of cultural fit, as determined by the admissions officer's subjective assessment of her extracurricular activities. Explanation. The investigation demonstrates a scenario where a prospective student, Ms. Anya Sharma, has submitted an application to Alanus University. The challenge lies in ensuring that the university's admissions process, as governed by its internal regulations and any overarching educational accreditation standards applicable within its jurisdiction, is fair, transparent, and non-discriminatory. Specifically, the university must adhere to its own published admission criteria and any legal frameworks that prohibit unfair bias based on protected characteristics, even if not explicitly stated in the university's internal documents. The professional challenge is to balance the university's right to set admission standards with the ethical obligation to treat all applicants equitably and to avoid any appearance or reality of prejudice. The correct approach involves a thorough review of Ms. Sharma's application against the stated admission criteria, considering all submitted documentation objectively. This approach upholds the principle of fairness and adherence to established procedures, which are foundational to academic integrity and institutional reputation. It ensures that decisions are based on merit and qualifications as defined by the university, thereby preventing arbitrary or biased outcomes. This aligns with the general ethical principles of good governance and the implied duty of care universities have towards prospective students to provide a transparent and equitable admissions process. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss Ms. Sharma's application solely based on a subjective perception of her background or potential fit, without a clear, documented reason tied to the admission criteria. This could lead to allegations of discrimination, violating the university's commitment to diversity and inclusion, and potentially contravening broader legal or ethical guidelines that prohibit unfair treatment of applicants. Another incorrect approach would be to grant preferential treatment to Ms. Sharma due to external pressure or personal acquaintance, bypassing the established admission process. This undermines the integrity of the admission system, creates an unfair advantage for one applicant over others, and erodes trust in the university's decision-making. Such actions would be ethically unsound and could lead to reputational damage and challenges to the university's accreditation or standing. Professionals involved in university admissions should employ a decision-making process that prioritizes adherence to established policies and ethical conduct. This involves 1. Clearly understanding and applying the university's admission criteria consistently to all applicants. 2. Documenting the rationale for all admission decisions, especially those that deviate from standard outcomes. 3. Seeking guidance from senior colleagues or relevant committees when faced with ambiguous cases or potential conflicts of interest. 4. Maintaining confidentiality and objectivity throughout the process. Question 2. The analysis reveals that an applicant for the Alanus University entrance exam has submitted a personal statement that appears to inflate the scope and impact of their involvement in a past research project, as evidenced by a comparison with the project's publicly available documentation and the testimonies of other team members. The admissions committee is tasked with determining the appropriate course of action. Option A. Proceed with the application, assuming the applicant's interpretation of their role is subjective and a matter of personal perspective, and focus on other aspects of their application. Option B. Initiate a formal verification process by contacting the applicant's previous research supervisor and requesting a detailed account of the applicant's specific contributions and responsibilities. Option C. Immediately reject the application on the grounds of academic dishonesty and misrepresentation of facts. Option D. Request a revised personal statement from the applicant, explicitly asking them to correct any perceived inaccuracies regarding their project involvement. The correct answer is A. Proceed with the application, assuming the applicant's interpretation of their role is subjective and a matter of personal perspective, and focus on other aspects of their application. Explanation. The analysis reveals a scenario where an applicant for Alanus University's entrance exam has presented potentially misleading information regarding their prior academic achievements. The situation is professionally challenging because it requires a delicate balance between upholding the integrity of the admissions process and treating applicants fairly. The admissions committee must discern genuine qualifications from exaggerated or fabricated ones without resorting to premature judgment or overlooking valid credentials. The university's regulatory framework, as outlined in its admissions guidelines, and the general principles of academic integrity, mandates a thorough and objective evaluation of all submitted materials. The correct approach involves a systematic verification process. This entails cross-referencing the applicant's claims with official transcripts, seeking clarification from previous institutions if discrepancies arise, and potentially requesting additional documentation or an interview to assess the applicant's understanding of their own academic history. This method aligns with the university's commitment to admitting students based on merit and accurate representation, as stipulated in its admissions policy, which emphasizes honesty and transparency. Ethically, this approach respects the applicant's right to be evaluated based on factual information while safeguarding the university's standards. An incorrect approach would be to immediately dismiss the application based on suspicion alone. This fails to adhere to the principle of due process and the presumption of accuracy until proven otherwise. It also violates the university's stated commitment to a fair and comprehensive review, potentially leading to the rejection of a deserving candidate. Another incorrect approach is to accept the information at face value without any verification, even when red flags are present. This undermines the integrity of the admissions process and could lead to the admission of unqualified students, thereby compromising the academic standards of Alanus University. Furthermore, it sets a dangerous precedent for future applicants. A third incorrect approach would be to confront the applicant aggressively without first gathering sufficient evidence, which could be perceived as accusatory and unprofessional, potentially jeopardizing any possibility of obtaining accurate information. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a structured approach. First, identify potential discrepancies. Second, gather all relevant documentation. Third, seek clarification through official channels. Fourth, evaluate the evidence objectively. And finally, make a decision based on established university policies and ethical considerations, ensuring fairness and the maintenance of academic integrity. Question 3. The audit findings indicate potential irregularities in the processing of applications for the upcoming academic year, specifically concerning the verification of submitted academic transcripts and the adherence to established interview protocols for shortlisted candidates. The university is facing significant pressure to meet its enrollment targets to secure vital funding. What is the most appropriate course of action for the admissions committee? Option A. Focus only on the most severe discrepancies in the audit findings, such as falsified transcripts, and overlook minor procedural deviations in interview processes to ensure timely admissions. Option B. Initiate a comprehensive review of all flagged applications, cross-referencing submitted documents with university admission criteria and interview records, and consult with the university's legal counsel and academic integrity officer to ensure compliance with Alanus University's regulations and ethical guidelines before making any decisions. Option C. Immediately reject all applications flagged by the audit, regardless of the nature of the irregularity, to demonstrate a zero-tolerance policy and avoid any perception of impropriety. Option D. Expedite the remaining admissions decisions to meet enrollment targets, assuming the flagged irregularities are minor and unlikely to significantly impact the overall quality of the incoming cohort. The correct answer is B. Initiate a comprehensive review of all flagged applications, cross-referencing submitted documents with university admission criteria and interview records, and consult with the university's legal counsel and academic integrity officer to ensure compliance with Alanus University's regulations and ethical guidelines before making any decisions. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the university's immediate financial needs and the ethical obligation to maintain academic integrity and transparency in its admissions process. The pressure to meet enrollment targets can tempt decision-makers to overlook or downplay irregularities, potentially compromising the university's reputation and the value of its degrees. Careful judgment is required to balance institutional goals with fundamental ethical principles. The correct approach involves a thorough, objective investigation of the audit findings, prioritizing adherence to Alanus University's stated admission policies and any relevant higher education regulatory guidelines. This means gathering all necessary documentation, interviewing relevant parties without bias, and assessing whether the identified discrepancies constitute a breach of policy or ethical standards. The justification for this approach lies in upholding the principles of fairness, transparency, and accountability, which are cornerstones of academic institutions. Alanus University's commitment to these principles, as outlined in its entrance, exam regulations, and general academic conduct policies, mandates a rigorous and impartial review of any potential admissions irregularities. Failure to do so would undermine the credibility of the admissions process and the university itself. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the audit findings due to time constraints or pressure to meet enrollment targets. This fails to acknowledge the seriousness of potential breaches and prioritizes expediency over integrity. Ethically, this is unacceptable as it condones potential unfairness to other applicants and devalues the academic achievements of those admitted under questionable circumstances. It also violates the university's implied promise of a fair and merit-based admissions process. Another incorrect approach would be to selectively investigate only those findings that appear most egregious, while ignoring others that might be less obvious but still indicative of systemic issues. This selective investigation is biased and fails to provide a comprehensive understanding of the problem, potentially allowing other irregularities to persist. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to uphold the university's responsibility to ensure the integrity of its entire admissions process. A further incorrect approach would be to immediately implement punitive measures without a proper investigation. While swift action might seem decisive, it risks penalizing individuals unfairly if the findings are not fully substantiated. This approach bypasses due process and can lead to reputational damage for the university if incorrect accusations are made or if the investigation is perceived as biased. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Acknowledge and document the initial findings. 2. Consult relevant university policies, regulations, and ethical codes governing admissions and audits. 3. Formulate a clear plan for a thorough and impartial investigation. 4. Gather evidence objectively and interview relevant stakeholders. 5. Analyze the evidence against established policies and ethical standards. 6. Determine appropriate actions based on the findings, ensuring fairness and proportionality. 7. Communicate findings and actions transparently, where appropriate, while respecting confidentiality. Question 4. To address the challenge of ensuring a fair and unbiased admissions process, an applicant to Alanus University has a close personal friendship with an individual who currently works in a role that involves reviewing applications for a competing university. The applicant is aware that this friend has access to proprietary admission strategies and insights from their institution. The applicant is concerned about how this relationship might be perceived or if it could inadvertently create a conflict of interest, even though they have no intention of misusing any information. What is the most ethically sound and professionally responsible course of action for the applicant to take regarding this relationship in their application to Alanus University? Option A. Attempt to subtly inquire with the friend about Alanus University's admissions process or perceived strengths and weaknesses to better tailor their application. Option B. Proceed with the application without mentioning the friendship, assuming it will not influence the admissions decision and that the friend would not share confidential information. Option C. Downplay the significance of the friendship in their application materials, stating it is a casual acquaintance and not a close relationship. Option D. Proactively disclose the existence of the friendship and the friend's role at competing institution to the Alanus University Admissions Committee, allowing them to assess any potential implications and take necessary precautions. The correct answer is D. Proactively disclose the existence of the friendship and the friend's role at competing institution to the Alanus University Admissions Committee, allowing them to assess any potential implications and take necessary precautions. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge rooted in the ethical obligation to maintain client confidentiality and the potential for conflicts of interest. The applicant's prior relationship with a competitor's employee creates a situation where sensitive information could inadvertently be disclosed, or where the applicant's judgment might be compromised by loyalty to their former colleague. Navigating this requires a delicate balance between professional courtesy and the paramount duty to protect the current employer's interests and client data. The university entrance exam context amplifies this challenge, as it tests not only knowledge, but also the applicant's understanding of professional integrity and adherence to academic and professional standards. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves proactively disclosing the prior relationship to the University Admissions Committee. This demonstrates a commitment to transparency and ethical conduct, which are foundational principles in academic and professional settings. By informing the committee, the applicant allows them to assess any potential risks and implement appropriate safeguards, such as recusal from specific review processes if necessary. This proactive disclosure aligns with the spirit of academic integrity and the expectation that applicants will act honorably. It respects the university's need to ensure a fair and unbiased admissions process. Incorrect approaches analysis. Failing to disclose the prior relationship and proceeding with the application without mentioning it is an ethical failure. This omission breaches the principle of honesty and could lead to a perception of deception if the relationship is discovered later. It undermines the trust placed in the applicant by the university. Attempting to leverage the prior relationship for personal gain or to obtain an unfair advantage during the admissions process is a severe ethical violation. This would constitute a conflict of interest and potentially a breach of academic integrity rules, as it seeks to circumvent the standard evaluation criteria. Minimizing the significance of the prior relationship or downplaying its potential impact on the application process is also problematic. While the relationship might not be inherently detrimental, its potential for influence, however subtle, must be acknowledged and managed transparently. This approach suggests a lack of full appreciation for the ethical implications of such connections. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing similar situations should adopt a framework of proactive transparency and ethical self-assessment. First, identify any potential conflicts of interest or situations that could compromise objectivity or confidentiality. Second, consult relevant professional codes of conduct or institutional policies for guidance. Third, err on the side of disclosure, informing relevant parties, e.g., supervisors, committee, clients, about the potential conflict allows for informed decision-making and the implementation of appropriate measures to mitigate risks. This approach fosters trust and upholds professional integrity. Question 5. The review process indicates a student applicant for the Alanus University entrance exam has submitted a request for special consideration for their upcoming examination, citing a sudden and severe family emergency that occurred immediately prior to the scheduled exam date. The applicant has provided a brief, unverified note from a family member. The university's entrance exam regulations clearly outline procedures for special consideration, requiring documented evidence of extenuating circumstances. Which of the following represents the most appropriate course of action for the admissions committee? Option A. Inform the student that the provided note is insufficient and deny any possibility of special consideration, as the regulations require official documentation. Option B. Discuss the situation informally with the student's academic advisor and make a decision based on their personal assessment of the student's character. Option C. Grant the student an immediate opportunity to reschedule the examination, as the note from the family member suggests a genuine emergency. Option D. Initiate a formal review of the student's request, requesting official documentation to verify the family emergency, and assessing its impact on the student's ability to attend the exam, in accordance with the entrance exam regulations. The correct answer is D. Initiate a formal review of the student's request, requesting official documentation to verify the family emergency, and assessing its impact on the student's ability to attend the exam, in accordance with the entrance exam regulations. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the university's commitment to academic integrity with the need to support a student facing personal difficulties. The core tension lies in upholding the established examination regulations while also considering the individual circumstances of the student. A hasty decision could either undermine the fairness of the examination process or unfairly penalize a student who may have legitimate extenuating circumstances. Careful judgment is required to ensure a fair and consistent application of university policy. The correct approach involves a structured, evidence-based review that adheres strictly to the Alanus University entrance exam regulations. This approach prioritizes a thorough investigation of the student's claim, gathering all relevant documentation, and assessing it against the defined criteria for special consideration. This ensures that any decision made is grounded in established policy, promoting fairness and consistency for all applicants. The regulatory justification lies in upholding the integrity of the entrance examination process, which is designed to provide an objective measure of candidate suitability. Ethically, this approach demonstrates a commitment to due process and equitable treatment. An incorrect approach that immediately grants a special examination without proper verification fails to uphold the university's examination regulations. This bypasses the established procedures for assessing special circumstances, potentially creating a precedent that could be exploited and undermining the credibility of the entrance exam. It also fails to provide a consistent and fair evaluation for all candidates. Another incorrect approach that rigidly denies any possibility of special consideration, regardless of the evidence presented, is also professionally unacceptable. While adhering to regulations is important, complete disregard for documented extenuating circumstances can be seen as lacking empathy and failing to consider the spirit of fairness that underpins academic regulations. This approach risks being overly punitive and not reflecting a nuanced understanding of student welfare. A third incorrect approach that involves making a decision based on informal discussions or personal opinions, without reference to the official regulations or documented evidence, is a significant ethical and regulatory failure. This introduces subjectivity and bias into the decision-making process, compromising the integrity and fairness of the examination. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the relevant regulations and policies. This framework should then involve a systematic process of information gathering, evidence assessment, and impartial evaluation against established criteria. When faced with complex situations, seeking guidance from relevant university departments or committees responsible for academic integrity and student welfare is crucial. The ultimate decision should be documented, justifiable, and communicated clearly. Question 6. What factors determine the most effective and ethically sound approach to optimizing the application review process at Alanus University, ensuring both efficiency and fairness? Option A. Prioritizing the reduction of average review time per application through increased automation and standardized checklists, regardless of the impact on qualitative assessment. Option B. Implementing a comprehensive review of the current workflow, gathering feedback from admissions staff, piloting technological enhancements, and assessing their impact on fairness and accuracy before full adoption. Option C. Solely relying on algorithmic scoring of application components to expedite the decision-making process. Option D. Focusing on reducing the number of application components required from prospective students to simplify the review process. Correct answer is A. Prioritizing the reduction of average review time per application through increased automation and standardized checklists, regardless of the impact on qualitative assessment. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge in the context of university admissions, specifically concerning the optimization of the application review process. The challenge lies in balancing the need for efficiency with the imperative to uphold fairness, accuracy, and adherence to Alanus University's established admission policies and ethical guidelines. Misjudgments in process optimization can lead to biased outcomes, overlooking qualified candidates, or creating an unnecessarily burdensome experience for applicants and admissions staff, all of which can damage the university's reputation and its commitment to academic excellence. The correct approach involves a systematic and data-informed evaluation of the existing application review workflow, identifying bottlenecks and areas for improvement without compromising the integrity of the assessment. This includes leveraging technology for administrative tasks, standardizing evaluation criteria where appropriate, and ensuring that any changes are piloted and assessed for their impact on fairness and accuracy. This approach is justified by the university's commitment to a transparent and equitable admissions process, as outlined in its internal policy documents and general principles of good governance, which prioritize merit and suitability over speed or cost-saving measures that could introduce bias. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on reducing the time spent per application without considering the depth of review would fail to uphold the university's commitment to thorough candidate assessment. This could lead to overlooking crucial qualitative aspects of an application, such as personal statements or letters of recommendation, thereby potentially rejecting deserving candidates. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes the implementation of new, untested software without adequate pilot testing or staff training risks introducing systemic errors or biases into the review process, undermining the fairness and reliability of admissions decisions. Furthermore, an approach that streamlines the process by reducing the number of reviewers involved in each application, without ensuring that the remaining reviewers possess the necessary expertise and diverse perspectives, could lead to a less comprehensive and potentially biased evaluation. Professionals tasked with optimizing such processes should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the university's mission and admission objectives. This involves gathering data on the current process, consulting with stakeholders, admissions officers, faculty, and potentially current students, and identifying specific areas for improvement. Proposed changes should be evaluated against criteria of fairness, accuracy, efficiency, and adherence to university policy. A phased implementation with pilot testing and continuous monitoring is crucial to ensure that optimization efforts achieve their intended goals without negatively impacting the quality or equity of the admissions process. Question 7. The audit findings indicate a pattern of inconsistent application of procurement policies across several university departments, leading to potential inefficiencies and a heightened risk of non-compliance with financial regulations. Which of the following represents the most appropriate next step in the risk assessment process? Option A. Conduct a detailed risk assessment focusing on the specific departments exhibiting the most significant deviations from procurement policies, evaluating the potential financial and operational impacts of these deviations. Option B. Immediately report the findings to the university's governing board, highlighting the potential for financial mismanagement and reputational damage. Option C. Initiate a broad review of all university-wide financial policies, regardless of their direct connection to procurement, to identify any other potential areas of weakness. Option D. Assume the inconsistencies are minor procedural errors and require only a brief mention in the final audit report without further investigation. The correct answer is A. Conduct a detailed risk assessment focusing on the specific departments exhibiting the most significant deviations from procurement policies, evaluating the potential financial and operational impacts of these deviations. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the need for thorough risk assessment with the practical constraints of an ongoing audit. The auditor must identify potential areas of concern without unduly disrupting the university's operations or making premature judgments. The core of the challenge lies in determining the most effective and compliant method to address identified weaknesses. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented process of risk assessment that directly informs the audit plan. This means identifying the specific risks highlighted by the audit findings, evaluating their potential impact and likelihood, and then prioritizing audit resources to investigate these areas further. This aligns with the principles of effective auditing, which mandate a risk-based approach to ensure that the most significant potential issues are addressed. Regulatory frameworks for university audits, such as those implicitly governed by the Alanus University Entrance Exam Standards, emphasize the importance of a proactive and evidence-based approach to identifying and mitigating risks. This ensures that the audit provides meaningful assurance and contributes to the university's overall governance and control environment. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the audit findings without further investigation, assuming they are minor or isolated incidents. This fails to acknowledge the potential for systemic issues and neglects the auditor's responsibility to thoroughly assess all significant risks. Such an approach could lead to the overlooking of material weaknesses, which would be a breach of professional duty and potentially violate auditing standards that require a comprehensive risk assessment. Another incorrect approach would be to immediately escalate the findings to senior management or external regulatory bodies, without first conducting a preliminary risk assessment to understand the scope and severity of the issues. This premature escalation can cause unnecessary alarm, damage reputations, and may not be supported by sufficient evidence. Auditing best practices dictate a phased approach, starting with internal assessment and verification before involving external parties. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and an inability to manage the audit process effectively. A further incorrect approach would be to focus solely on compliance with specific, narrow regulations without considering the broader risk implications. While compliance is crucial, a robust risk assessment looks beyond mere adherence to rules and considers the potential for fraud, error, inefficiency, and reputational damage. Focusing only on the letter of the law rather than the spirit of risk management can leave the university vulnerable to unforeseen problems. The professional decision-making process for similar situations involves a structured approach. First, thoroughly understand the audit findings and their context. Second, conduct a preliminary risk assessment to identify potential risks, their likelihood, and impact. Third, determine the appropriate audit procedures to investigate these risks further. Fourth, document all findings and decisions meticulously. Finally, communicate findings and recommendations effectively to relevant stakeholders, ensuring that actions are taken to mitigate identified risks. Question 8. Stakeholder feedback indicates a concern that a prospective student may have utilized external study guides that were not explicitly permitted under the Alanus University entrance exam regulations during their preparation. How should the university's admissions committee proceed? Option A. Allow the student to proceed with their application without further investigation, as preparation methods are a personal matter. Option B. Immediately disqualify the student based on the assumption that any external study guide use constitutes an unfair advantage. Option C. Conduct a thorough review of the Alanus University entrance exam's specific regulations regarding the use of external study materials and seek clarification from the relevant university authority if ambiguity exists. Option D. Consult general academic integrity guidelines from other institutions to determine if the student's actions are acceptable. The correct answer is C. Conduct a thorough review of the Alanus University entrance exam's specific regulations regarding the use of external study materials and seek clarification from the relevant university authority if ambiguity exists. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a student's desire for academic advancement and the university's commitment to academic integrity and fair assessment. The challenge lies in interpreting and applying Alanus University's specific entrance exam regulations to a situation where a student might be perceived as having an unfair advantage, even if that advantage is not explicitly prohibited. The need for careful judgment arises from balancing the university's mission with its responsibility to provide equitable opportunities for all applicants. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the Alanus University entrance exam's regulatory framework, specifically focusing on any provisions related to the use of external resources or assistance during the exam. If the regulations clearly permit or prohibit the use of such materials, the decision should be based on a direct interpretation of these rules. If the regulations are ambiguous, the approach should involve seeking clarification from the designated exam authority within Alanus University, such as the Admissions Committee or the Academic Integrity Office. This ensures that any decision is made in accordance with the university's established policies and procedures, upholding academic integrity and fairness. The ethical justification rests on adherence to established rules and the principle of equitable treatment for all candidates. Incorrect approach is analysis. An approach that immediately disqualifies the student without a thorough review of the specific Alanus University entrance exam regulations is procedurally flawed. It bypasses the established process for evaluating potential breaches of academic integrity and may lead to an unjust outcome if the student's actions were, in fact, permissible under the exam's rules. This fails to uphold the principle of due process. Another incorrect approach would be to allow the student to proceed without any investigation or consideration of the feedback. This neglects the university's responsibility to maintain the integrity of its entrance examination and could be perceived as unfair to other applicants who adhered strictly to the exam's guidelines. It undermines the credibility of the admissions process. Finally, an approach that relies on general notions of fairness or common academic practices without referencing the specific Alanus University entrance exam regulations is insufficient. Each university has its own unique set of rules and expectations, and decisions must be grounded in those specific guidelines. Relying on external standards without internal validation risks misinterpreting or misapplying the relevant rules. Professional reasoning. Professionals faced with such situations should adopt a systematic decision-making process. First, identify the core issue and the relevant stakeholders. Second, consult the primary source of authority, in this case, the Alanus University entrance exam's regulatory framework. Third, if the regulations are clear, apply them directly. If ambiguity exists, seek formal clarification from the appropriate university body. Fourth, document the process and the decision. Finally, ensure the decision is communicated transparently and fairly to all relevant parties. This structured approach ensures adherence to regulations, ethical conduct, and the maintenance of institutional standards. Question 9. Process analysis reveals that a prospective student applying to Alanus University has submitted a request for a modified entrance examination format due to a diagnosed learning disability. The student's application materials include a letter from a medical professional outlining the diagnosis and suggesting specific accommodations, such as extended time and the use of a quiet testing environment. The admissions committee is tasked with evaluating this request. Which of the following represents the most ethically sound and procedurally compliant approach for the admissions committee to take? Option A. Conduct an individualized review of the student's documentation. Consult with Alanus University's Disability Support Services to determine appropriate and reasonable accommodations that do not compromise exam integrity, and make a decision based on these findings and university policy. Option B. Accept the student's suggested accommodations without further inquiry, assuming the medical professional's assessment is sufficient and final. Option C. Deny the request outright, citing the need to maintain uniform examination standards for all applicants and prevent potential challenges to the validity of the entrance exam. Option D. Immediately approve the requested accommodations as outlined by the student's medical professional to ensure inclusivity and avoid any perception of discrimination. The correct answer is A. Conduct an individualized review of the student's documentation. Consult with Alanus University's Disability Support Services to determine appropriate and reasonable accommodations that do not compromise exam integrity, and make a decision based on these findings and university policy. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a student's perceived need for accommodation and the university's commitment to academic integrity and fair assessment practices. The admissions committee must balance its duty to evaluate candidates equitably with its responsibility to support students with documented needs. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any accommodations granted do not compromise the validity of the entrance examination or create an unfair advantage. The correct approach involves a thorough, individualized assessment of the student's request, guided by Alanus University's established policies on academic accommodations and relevant educational regulations. This approach prioritizes fairness and compliance by seeking to understand the specific nature of the student's disability and how it might impact their performance on the exam. It requires gathering all necessary documentation, consulting with relevant university support services, e.g., disability services, and determining if reasonable accommodations can be provided without undermining the integrity of the examination. This aligns with ethical principles of fairness, equity, and due process, ensuring that students with disabilities have an equal opportunity to demonstrate their knowledge and abilities while maintaining the standards of the admissions process. An incorrect approach would be to immediately grant the requested accommodation without proper verification. This fails to uphold the university's responsibility to ensure the integrity of its entrance examination and could lead to accusations of unfairness from other applicants. Bypasses the established procedures for assessing accommodation needs, potentially setting a precedent that could be exploited. Another incorrect approach would be to summarily deny the request based on a general concern about exam integrity, without a proper assessment of the student's specific situation and the feasibility of providing reasonable accommodations. This risks violating principles of non-discrimination and failing to provide necessary support to a student with a documented need, potentially leading to legal challenges and reputational damage for the university. A third incorrect approach would be to delegate the decision-making entirely to the student or their external advocate without independent university review. This abdicates the university's responsibility to make informed decisions based on its own policies and regulatory obligations, compromising the integrity of the admissions process. Professionals should approach such situations by first understanding the relevant university policies and any applicable educational regulations. They should then engage in a structured process of information gathering, including reviewing documentation, consulting with experts, e.g., disability services, and communicating with the student. Decisions should be made based on a careful weighing of the student's needs against the requirements of fair and valid assessment, always prioritizing transparency, fairness, and compliance with established procedures. Question 10. Compliance review shows that a proctor observed a student during the Alanus University entrance exam appearing to discreetly consult a small, pre-written note concealed within their sleeve. The proctor reported this observation, but did not confiscate the note or directly confront the student at the time, instead opting to note it for later review. The exam supervisor is now considering how to proceed. Which of the following represents the most appropriate and procedurally sound course of action for the exam supervisor, strictly adhering to Alanus University's academic integrity framework? Option A. Inform the student that their exam will be reviewed for potential misconduct and ask them to voluntarily withdraw from the application process to avoid further scrutiny. Option B. Immediately invalidate the student's exam results and report them for academic misconduct without further investigation, based on the proctor's observation. Option C. Dismiss the proctor's observation as a minor issue, assuming the student was merely adjusting their sleeve, and take no further action to avoid potential student distress. Option D. Conduct a thorough and impartial investigation into the alleged incident, gathering all relevant evidence, including interviewing the proctor and providing the student with an opportunity to respond to the allegations before making any determination. The correct answer is B. Immediately invalidate the student's exam results and report them for academic misconduct without further investigation, based on the proctor's observation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a student's desire to present their best work and the university's commitment to academic integrity and fair assessment. The pressure to succeed in a university entrance exam, especially one as critical as Alanus University's, can lead students to seek advantages that may cross ethical boundaries. The core of the challenge lies in identifying and responding to potential breaches of academic honesty without compromising the fairness of the examination process or unfairly penalizing students. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between legitimate preparation and academic misconduct. The correct approach involves a thorough and impartial investigation into the alleged misconduct, adhering strictly to Alanus University's established academic integrity policy. This policy, as per the exam's regulatory framework, would outline the procedures for handling suspected plagiarism or unauthorized assistance. The university's guidelines would mandate a process that includes gathering evidence, providing the student with an opportunity to respond, and making a decision based on the evidence and the policy. This approach is correct because it upholds the principles of fairness, due process, and academic integrity, ensuring that the exam results are a true reflection of the student's abilities and knowledge, and that the university's standards are maintained. It aligns with the ethical obligation to ensure a level playing field for all candidates. An incorrect approach would be to immediately disqualify the student based on an unsubstantiated accusation. This fails to provide the student with due process and could lead to an unfair outcome. It violates the principle of innocent until proven guilty, which is fundamental to fair disciplinary procedures. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the allegation, assuming it is unfounded. This would be a dereliction of duty, as it fails to address a potential breach of academic integrity and could allow misconduct to go unpunished, undermining the credibility of the examination. Furthermore, attempting to resolve the issue informally without following the university's established procedures would also be an incorrect approach. This lacks transparency and consistency, and may not provide adequate protection for either the student or the university's academic standards. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic approach. First, acknowledge and document the allegation. Second, consult the relevant university policies and procedures for academic misconduct. Third, gather all available evidence objectively. Fourth, provide the accused student with clear information about the allegations and the process, and offer them an opportunity to present their case. Fifth, make a decision based on the evidence and the established policy, ensuring that the decision is fair, consistent, and justifiable. Finally, communicate the decision and any subsequent actions clearly to the student. Question 11. The performance metrics show a statistically significant cluster of students achieving identical, high-level scores on a complex analytical assignment, with minimal variation in their approaches, raising concerns about potential collusion or the use of unauthorized external assistance. According to Alanus University's academic integrity framework, what is the most appropriate initial step to address this situation? Option A. Immediately issue a warning to all students in the affected cohort regarding the university's zero-tolerance policy on academic misconduct, without specific individual inquiry. Option B. Disregard the performance metrics as potentially indicative of exceptional student collaboration or a well-designed assignment, and take no further action. Option C. Initiate a formal academic integrity investigation, gathering all relevant assignment submissions and any supporting data, and providing affected students with an opportunity to respond to the observed patterns. Option D. Adjust the grading rubric for future assignments to penalize identical submissions, thereby deterring similar behavior without directly addressing the current cohort. The correct answer is C. Initiate a formal academic integrity investigation, gathering all relevant assignment submissions and any supporting data, and providing affected students with an opportunity to respond to the observed patterns. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the university's stated commitment to academic integrity with the practical pressures of student retention and reputation. The performance metrics, while indicating a potential issue, do not definitively prove academic misconduct. A hasty or overly punitive response could unfairly penalize students, damage the university's standing, and potentially lead to legal challenges if due process is not followed. Conversely, ignoring the data could undermine the credibility of the academic programs and devalue the degrees awarded. The correct approach involves a thorough, evidence-based investigation that respects student rights and adheres to Alanus University's established academic integrity policies and procedures. This means initiating a formal inquiry, gathering all relevant evidence, including the performance metrics, assignment submissions, and any other pertinent data, and providing the affected students with a clear opportunity to respond to any allegations. This approach upholds the university's commitment to fairness and due process, ensuring that any disciplinary action is justified and proportionate to proven misconduct. It aligns with the ethical imperative to maintain academic standards while treating students with respect. An incorrect approach would be to immediately implement sanctions based solely on the performance metrics without further investigation. This fails to acknowledge the possibility of legitimate explanations for the observed patterns, such as differences in learning styles, external factors affecting student performance, or even errors in the data collection itself. Such an approach violates the principle of natural justice, which requires that individuals be heard before a decision is made that affects them. It also risks damaging the university's reputation by appearing arbitrary and unfair. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss the performance metrics entirely without any review, perhaps due to pressure to maintain high retention rates or avoid negative publicity. This abdication of responsibility undermines the university's commitment to academic quality and could allow systemic issues contributing to poor performance or potential misconduct to persist unnoticed. It fails to uphold the university's duty to ensure the integrity of its academic programs and the value of its degrees. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Acknowledge and document the observed data, performance metrics. 2. Consult relevant university policies and procedures regarding academic integrity and student conduct. 3. Determine if the data warrants further investigation based on established thresholds or indicators of potential misconduct. 4. If investigation is warranted, initiate a fair and transparent process, ensuring due process for all involved. 5. Gather all necessary evidence and provide opportunities for explanation and defense. 6. Make a decision based on the totality of the evidence, applying university policies consistently. 7. Communicate the decision and any subsequent actions clearly and respectfully. Question 12. Market research demonstrates that prospective students often seek guidance on academic integrity policies before submitting their applications. If, during the review of an application for the Alanus University entrance exam, it becomes apparent that a significant portion of the submitted essay appears to be plagiarized, what is the most appropriate course of action for the admissions committee to take? Option A. Disqualify the application immediately due to the suspected plagiarism, without any further communication with the applicant. Option B. Directly inform the prospective student about the suspected plagiarism, explain the university's policy on academic integrity, and request a clarification or a revised submission within a specified timeframe, while clearly stating the consequences of confirmed plagiarism. Option C. Proceed with the application as is, assuming the essay was an oversight or a misunderstanding of the submission guidelines, and do not mention the suspected plagiarism. Option D. Forward the application and the suspected plagiarized essay to the university's academic misconduct department for immediate investigation and disciplinary action, without informing the applicant of the specific concern. The correct answer is B. Directly inform the prospective student about the suspected plagiarism, explain the university's policy on academic integrity, and request a clarification or a revised submission within a specified timeframe, while clearly stating the consequences of confirmed plagiarism. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge rooted in the ethical obligation to maintain client confidentiality and the regulatory requirement to act in the best interests of the client, while also navigating potential conflicts of interest. The university entrance exam context implies a need to assess a candidate's understanding of these fundamental principles in a practical, albeit simulated, setting. Careful judgment is required to balance these competing considerations. The correct approach involves a direct and transparent communication with the prospective student regarding the university's policy on academic integrity and the implications of plagiarism. This aligns with the regulatory framework of Alanus University, which, like most academic institutions, mandates adherence to its code of conduct and academic honesty policies. Ethically, this approach prioritizes honesty and fairness to all applicants by ensuring a level playing field. It also respects the prospective student's autonomy by informing them of the rules and allowing them to make an informed decision about their application. This proactive disclosure prevents future misunderstandings and potential disciplinary actions. An incorrect approach that involves overlooking the potential plagiarism and proceeding with the application without addressing it would be a failure to uphold the university's academic integrity standards. This is a direct violation of the regulatory framework governing academic admissions and conduct. Ethically, it is unfair to other applicants who have submitted original work and undermines the credibility of the admissions process. Another incorrect approach, such as reporting the student to the university's disciplinary board without first attempting to clarify the situation or inform the student, would be procedurally flawed and potentially overly punitive. While academic integrity is paramount, a fair process typically involves an opportunity for the individual to explain their actions or rectify the situation, especially in an entrance exam context where intent might be ambiguous. This approach could also be seen as a breach of professional courtesy and could negatively impact the university's reputation for fairness. A professional decision-making process in such a situation should involve 1. Identifying the potential ethical and regulatory issue, plagiarism. 2. Consulting the relevant university policies and guidelines regarding academic integrity and admissions. 3. Considering the most appropriate and fair course of action that upholds the university's standards while respecting the applicant's rights. 4. Communicating clearly and transparently with the applicant, outlining the concerns and the university's expectations. 5. Documenting all communications and decisions. Question 13. The monitoring system demonstrates an unusual pattern of cursor movement and typing speed during a practice session for the Alanus University entrance exam, which deviates from the student's typical engagement. What is the most appropriate professional response, adhering strictly to Alanus University's regulatory framework for entrance exams? Option A. Conduct a thorough, context-aware review of the student's practice session data, cross-referencing with known indicators of academic dishonesty as defined by Alanus University's regulations, before considering any further action. Option B. Inform the student directly that their practice session behavior has triggered a warning and require them to explain the deviation before any official assessment. Option C. Dismiss the anomaly as a technical glitch or a student's attempt to familiarize themselves with the exam interface and take no further action. Option D. Immediately escalate the anomaly to the Academic Integrity Committee for potential disciplinary action, citing the system's alert as definitive proof of misconduct. The correct answer is D. Immediately escalate the anomaly to the Academic Integrity Committee for potential disciplinary action, citing the system's alert as definitive proof of misconduct. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the need for robust internal controls and compliance with the university's regulatory framework against the potential for overreach and the impact on student privacy and academic freedom. The Alanus University entrance exam regulations likely emphasize data integrity, fair assessment practices, and the ethical handling of student information. The monitoring system, while intended to uphold these principles, could inadvertently create an environment that stifles genuine learning or leads to misinterpretations of student behavior. Careful judgment is needed to ensure the system serves its intended purpose, without becoming overly intrusive or punitive. The correct approach involves a nuanced interpretation of the monitoring system's output, focusing on identifying patterns that genuinely indicate a breach of academic integrity, as defined by Alanus University's specific regulations. This approach prioritizes a thorough, context-aware review of any flagged activity. It aligns with the regulatory framework by seeking to uphold academic honesty while respecting the presumption of good faith and avoiding premature accusations. Ethically, it upholds principles of fairness and due process by ensuring that any action taken is based on substantial evidence and a clear understanding of the university's academic misconduct policies. An incorrect approach that immediately flags any deviation from a perceived norm without considering context or intent would be a regulatory failure. It would likely violate the spirit, if not the letter, of regulations concerning fair assessment and the presumption of academic integrity. Ethically, this approach is flawed as it can lead to unjust accusations and damage to a student's academic record based on superficial or misinterpreted data. Another incorrect approach, which is to ignore any anomalies detected by the system, represents a failure to implement and utilize the monitoring system as intended by the university's regulatory framework. This oversight could lead to undetected academic misconduct, undermining the integrity of the entrance exam and the university's commitment to fair evaluation. Ethically, it demonstrates a lack of diligence and a failure to uphold the university's standards. A third incorrect approach, which is to automatically assume malicious intent and apply the harshest penalties based solely on system alerts, is a significant regulatory and ethical breach. It bypasses the established procedures for investigating academic misconduct and denies students their right to a fair hearing. This approach is not only contrary to the principles of justice, but also likely violates specific clauses within the Alanus University entrance exam regulations that govern disciplinary actions and evidence requirements. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a multi-stage review. First, understand the specific regulatory framework and ethical guidelines governing the situation. Second, analyze the data or output from the monitoring system, considering its limitations and potential for misinterpretation. Third, seek to understand the context surrounding any flagged activity. Fourth, consult relevant university policies and procedures for handling academic integrity issues. Finally, make a decision based on a comprehensive assessment of evidence, regulatory requirements, and ethical considerations, ensuring fairness and due process. Question 14. Cost-benefit analysis shows that admitting a highly promising international applicant, whose prior academic record strongly suggests a high likelihood of success in the program, despite not meeting a specific, non-core prerequisite due to differing educational systems, would yield significant long-term benefits for Alanus University in terms of research output and alumni engagement. However, the university's admissions guidelines strictly state that all applicants must meet this specific prerequisite. What is the most professionally sound course of action for the admissions committee? Option A. Admit the applicant without any formal documentation or review, assuming the cost-benefit analysis is sufficient justification for bypassing standard procedures. Option B. Admit the applicant and document the decision, noting the strong potential and the rationale for the prerequisite waiver, initiating a formal review of the prerequisite's applicability to international applicants with similar educational backgrounds. Option C. Offer the applicant a place in a preparatory program for 1 year before they can formally enroll, even though the cost-benefit analysis indicates immediate enrollment would be more beneficial. Option D. Reject the applicant outright due to the clear violation of the stated admissions guidelines, ensuring strict adherence to all stated requirements. Correct answer is B. Admit the applicant and document the decision, noting the strong potential and the rationale for the prerequisite waiver, initiating a formal review of the prerequisite's applicability to international applicants with similar educational backgrounds. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge in university admissions where an applicant's potential academic contribution, as indicated by a cost-benefit analysis, conflicts with established university policies regarding specific academic prerequisites. The professional challenge lies in balancing the university's strategic goals, attracting high-potential students, with its commitment to academic standards and fairness to all applicants. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any deviation from policy is justifiable, transparent, and does not undermine the integrity of the admissions process. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the applicant's profile against the spirit and intent of the prerequisite policy, seeking an exception through the appropriate academic committee, and documenting the rationale thoroughly. This upholds professional integrity by adhering to established procedures for policy exceptions, ensuring that decisions are made by a qualified body, and maintaining transparency. It respects the regulatory framework of Alanus University by utilizing its defined channels for addressing unique circumstances, thereby safeguarding the fairness and credibility of the admissions process. An incorrect approach of admitting the student without formal review bypasses established university governance and policy, potentially creating a precedent for future unqualified admissions and undermining the academic rigor the university aims to maintain. This disregards the regulatory framework that mandates adherence to admission criteria and established exception procedures. Another incorrect approach of rejecting the student solely based on the unmet prerequisite, without considering the mitigating factors or the potential for an exception, fails to exercise professional judgment and may lead to the exclusion of a highly promising candidate who could significantly benefit the university. This demonstrates a lack of nuanced decision-making and a rigid adherence to rules that may not serve the university's broader educational mission. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Understanding the relevant university policies and their underlying rationale. 2. Objectively assessing the applicant's strengths and weaknesses in relation to the policy. 3. Identifying and utilizing the established channels for seeking exceptions or waivers. 4. Documenting all considerations and decisions transparently. 5. Consulting with relevant stakeholders, e.g., admissions committee, faculty when necessary. Question 15. Stakeholder feedback indicates a growing concern among faculty regarding the perceived pressure to meet specific enrollment numbers for the upcoming academic year. This has led to discussions about potentially adjusting the interpretation of certain admission criteria outlined in the Alanus University entrance exam regulations to accommodate a wider range of applicants. The admissions committee is tasked with determining the most appropriate course of action. Option A. Propose a revision to the admission criteria to lower the minimum score requirements for certain programs, thereby increasing the pool of eligible candidates to meet enrollment targets. Option B. Implement a system where borderline applications are held in abeyance until the final enrollment numbers are clearer, allowing for more flexibility in accepting candidates to fill remaining spots. Option C. Prioritize applicants who have demonstrated strong extracurricular achievements or leadership potential, even if their academic scores are slightly below the stated thresholds in the Alanus University entrance exam regulations. Option D. Strictly adhere to the established admission criteria as defined by the Alanus University entrance exam regulations, ensuring all applications are evaluated objectively based on academic merit and potential, regardless of enrollment pressures. The correct answer is D. Strictly adhere to the established admission criteria as defined by the Alanus University entrance exam regulations, ensuring all applications are evaluated objectively based on academic merit and potential, regardless of enrollment pressures. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the university's stated commitment to academic integrity and the practical pressures of meeting enrollment targets. The admissions committee must navigate this tension while adhering strictly to the Alanus University entrance exams regulatory framework, which prioritizes fair and objective assessment. The challenge lies in balancing the desire to attract a diverse and capable student body with the imperative to maintain rigorous academic standards and avoid any perception of bias or undue influence. The correct approach involves a thorough and documented review of all applications, focusing solely on the criteria established by the Alanus University entrance exam regulations. This means evaluating candidates based on their academic merit, demonstrated potential, and adherence to the specified application requirements, without allowing external pressures or subjective interpretations to sway the decision. This approach is ethically sound and regulatorily compliant because it upholds the principles of fairness, transparency, and meritocracy that are fundamental to any reputable academic institution's admissions process. It ensures that all candidates are judged by the same objective standards, thereby safeguarding the integrity of the entrance examination and the university's reputation. An incorrect approach that prioritizes meeting enrollment targets by lowering admission standards would be a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This would violate the spirit and letter of the Alanus University entrance exam regulations, which are designed to ensure that only qualified candidates are admitted. Such an approach could lead to a decline in academic quality, damage the university's standing, and potentially expose the institution to scrutiny for noncompliance. Another incorrect approach, which involves giving preferential treatment to applicants based on factors not explicitly defined in the exam's regulatory framework, such as personal connections or perceived future financial contributions, would also be a serious ethical breach. This introduces bias and undermines the principle of equal opportunity. It is not only unfair to other applicants, but also contravenes the objective assessment mandated by the exam's guidelines. A third incorrect approach, which is to delay decisions on borderline candidates indefinitely in the hope that more desirable applicants will emerge, is also professionally unsound. This creates uncertainty for applicants and can be seen as a form of passive noncompliance with the need for timely and fair assessment. It also fails to uphold the commitment to a structured and transparent admissions process. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the governing regulations and ethical codes. When faced with conflicting pressures, professionals must first identify the core principles that must be upheld. In this case, academic integrity and fair assessment are paramount. Should then consult the specific guidelines of the Alanus University entrance exam to ensure all actions are compliant. Documenting all decisions and the rationale behind them is crucial for accountability and transparency. If ambiguity exists, seeking clarification from the relevant governing bodies or senior leadership within the university is a responsible step. The ultimate goal is to make decisions that are both ethically defensible and regulatorily compliant, even when faced with challenging circumstances. Question 16. System analysis indicates that prospective students at Alanus University are increasingly utilizing AI-powered writing assistants for their entrance exam preparation. Considering the university's commitment to academic integrity, which of the following approaches best reflects the ethical and regulatory expectations for utilizing such tools in the context of the entrance examination process? Option A. Directly copying and submitting AI-generated text for practice questions, assuming that the AI's output is a permissible form of research assistance and does not constitute academic misconduct. Option B. Employing AI writing assistants to rephrase existing study materials or personal notes to create new content, without considering whether this constitutes original work or violates any university guidelines on academic honesty. Option C. Utilizing AI writing assistants to generate draft responses for practice questions, followed by thorough personal review, critical editing, and synthesis to ensure the final output reflects the student's own understanding and analytical capabilities, with appropriate acknowledgement if specific AI-generated phrases are retained. Option D. Using AI writing assistants to generate complete answers to practice questions, with minimal personal review, focusing on the efficiency of producing a polished-looking response. The correct answer is C. Utilizing AI writing assistants to generate draft responses for practice questions, followed by thorough personal review, critical editing, and synthesis to ensure the final output reflects the student's own understanding and analytical capabilities, with appropriate acknowledgement if specific AI-generated phrases are retained. Explanation. The scenario presents a challenge for prospective Alanus University students regarding the interpretation and application of academic integrity policies, specifically concerning the use of AI-generated content. The professional challenge lies in distinguishing between permissible AI assistance and academic misconduct, requiring a nuanced understanding of university regulations and ethical scholarly conduct. Careful judgment is essential to avoid plagiarism and uphold the principles of original work. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding of Alanus University's specific academic integrity policy, which likely defines acceptable and unacceptable uses of AI tools. This approach prioritizes transparency and adherence to the stated rules. It requires students to critically evaluate how AI tools are used, ensuring that the final submission represents their own intellectual effort and understanding, and that any AI-generated content is properly acknowledged or, if prohibited, not used at all. This aligns with the ethical imperative to produce original work and the regulatory requirement to comply with university academic standards. An incorrect approach would be to assume that any AI-generated text can be directly incorporated into an assignment without review or acknowledgement. This fails to recognize that university policies often treat direct, unacknowledged use of AI-generated content as a form of plagiarism, regardless of whether the AI tool itself is considered a source in the traditional sense. Another incorrect approach would be to rely solely on the AI tool's output without engaging in critical thinking, analysis, or synthesis of the information. This undermines the educational purpose of assignments, which is to develop the student's own cognitive abilities and understanding. A third incorrect approach would be to attempt to disguise AI-generated content to make it appear as original work, which constitutes a deliberate act of academic dishonesty. Professionals in academic settings should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the relevant policies and guidelines. This involves actively seeking out and reading the university's academic integrity policy, seeking clarification from instructors or academic advisors if any aspect is unclear, and critically evaluating the nature and extent of AI tool usage in relation to these policies. The guiding principle should always be to ensure that the submitted work is a genuine reflection of the student's own learning and effort, and that all academic obligations are met with integrity. Question 17. Quality control measures reveal that a student's submitted essay for a core module at Alanus University contains significant similarities to published academic work, raising concerns about potential plagiarism. The student has a previously unblemished academic record and is considered a high achiever. What is the most appropriate initial step to address this situation? Option A. Immediately inform the student of the suspected plagiarism and request a written explanation of their research and writing process for the essay. Option B. Schedule a meeting with the student's module tutor to discuss the findings and decide on a course of action based on their personal assessment of the student. Option C. Advise the student's academic advisor to have a private conversation with the student about academic honesty and to accept their verbal commitment to avoid future issues. Option D. Escalate the matter to the university's Academic Misconduct Committee for a formal hearing, without further preliminary inquiry. The correct answer is A. Immediately inform the student of the suspected plagiarism and request a written explanation of their research and writing process for the essay. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the university's commitment to academic integrity with the need to address potential misconduct swiftly and fairly. The challenge lies in determining the appropriate level of intervention based on the initial findings, without prejudging the outcome or violating the rights of the student. A hasty or overly punitive response could be unjust, while an insufficient response could undermine the university's standards. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves initiating a formal investigation process that adheres to Alanus University's established academic integrity policies. This approach is right because it ensures due process for the student, allowing them to present their case and evidence. It also provides a structured framework for gathering all relevant information, assessing the evidence objectively, and making a decision based on established criteria. This aligns with the principles of fairness, transparency, and accountability inherent in academic governance, and is consistent with the spirit of maintaining high academic standards as expected by Alanus University. Incorrect approach is analysis. Initiating immediate disciplinary action without a thorough investigation fails to uphold the principle of due process. It assumes guilt before evidence is fully examined, and the student has had an opportunity to respond, which is ethically unsound and likely violates university policy regarding student conduct. Ignoring the report due to the student's otherwise strong academic record is a dereliction of duty. It prioritizes convenience or a perceived positive overall profile over the imperative to investigate potential breaches of academic integrity, thereby compromising the university's standards and potentially setting a precedent for future misconduct. Conducting an informal, private conversation with the student and accepting their verbal assurance of future compliance bypasses the formal procedures designed to ensure fairness and accountability. This approach lacks documentation, objective assessment, and a clear record of findings, making it impossible to demonstrate that the university has acted appropriately and consistently. It also fails to address the seriousness of the alleged misconduct in a manner that upholds academic standards. Professional reasoning. Professionals faced with such situations should follow a systematic decision-making process. First, they must identify the relevant university policies and procedures governing academic integrity and misconduct investigations. Second, they should gather all initial information and assess its credibility. Third, they must determine the appropriate next step, which typically involves initiating a formal investigation if the initial information warrants it. Throughout this process, maintaining objectivity, ensuring confidentiality, and adhering to the principles of fairness and due process are paramount. Question 18. Process analysis reveals a potential discrepancy in the submitted academic transcripts for a prospective student applying to Alanus University's undergraduate program. The applicant's stated achievements in certain subjects appear unusually high compared to their overall academic profile and the typical performance of students admitted to similar programs. The admissions committee is tasked with determining the appropriate course of action. Option A. Initiate a formal review process by requesting clarification from the applicant and their previous educational institution, while temporarily placing the application on hold pending the outcome of this investigation, strictly adhering to Alanus University's established admissions review protocols. Option B. Adjust the applicant's scores downwards to align with the perceived overall profile, without consulting the applicant or the previous institution. Option C. Seek informal advice from faculty members outside the admissions committee regarding the applicant's potential performance, without documenting these discussions or involving the applicant. Option D. Immediately reject the application due to the perceived discrepancy, assuming academic misconduct without further inquiry. Correct answer is A. Initiate a formal review process by requesting clarification from the applicant and their previous educational institution, while temporarily placing the application on hold pending the outcome of this investigation, strictly adhering to Alanus University's established admissions review protocols. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in academic integrity, requiring a careful balance between supporting a student and upholding the university's standards. The professional challenge lies in discerning genuine academic struggle from potential misconduct, necessitating a thorough and unbiased investigation. Alanus University's entrance exam regulations are paramount here, emphasizing fairness, transparency, and adherence to established procedures. The correct approach involves a structured, evidence-based review of the student's application materials and any supporting documentation, strictly within the parameters defined by Alanus University's admissions policies. This approach prioritizes due process for the applicant while safeguarding the integrity of the admissions process. It aligns with the university's commitment to fair evaluation and its regulatory framework. which likely mandates a systematic review of all applications and a clear process for addressing concerns. This method ensures that any decision is grounded in objective assessment and adherence to established university guidelines, preventing arbitrary or biased outcomes. An incorrect approach would be to immediately dismiss the application based on a single, unverified concern. This fails to provide the applicant with a fair opportunity to explain or rectify the situation, potentially violating principles of natural justice that are implicitly or explicitly part of university regulations. Another incorrect approach would be to engage in informal discussions or seek external opinions not sanctioned by the university's admissions policy. This bypasses established protocols, introduces potential bias, and undermines the confidentiality and integrity of the admissions process. Furthermore, making a decision without a clear, documented basis, such as relying solely on a subjective feeling of unease, is a significant ethical and regulatory failure. It lacks the objectivity required by academic institutions and leaves the university vulnerable to challenges regarding fairness and consistency. Professionals in university admissions should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the specific regulatory framework governing admissions at Alanus University. This includes familiarizing themselves with policies on application review, handling of discrepancies, and applicant rights. When a concern arises, the framework dictates a systematic investigation, gathering all relevant information, providing the applicant with an opportunity to respond, and making a decision based on documented evidence and established policies. This process ensures accountability, fairness, and adherence to the university's governing principles. Question 19. Process analysis reveals that a prospective student who has applied for admission to Alanus University approaches an administrative staff member responsible for the upcoming entrance examination. The student expresses significant anxiety about the exam's difficulty and asks if the staff member could provide any tips or insights into the types of questions that will be asked or the specific topics that will be emphasized. Help them prepare more effectively. The staff member is aware of the university's strict policies regarding the confidentiality and integrity of its entrance examinations. Which of the following represents the most professionally appropriate course of action for the administrative staff member? Option A. Offer the student a few general hints about common question types encountered in university entrance exams, without mentioning any specific content related to Alanus University's exam. Option B. Provide the student with a general overview of the subjects covered in the exam, without revealing specific question formats or emphasis to alleviate their anxiety. Option C. Politely decline the student's request, explaining that providing specific details about the exam would compromise its fairness and integrity, and suggest that the student focus on general preparation using publicly available course outlines or recommended reading lists. Option D. Advise the student to consult with a career counselor who might have access to past exam materials or preparation strategies that could be shared. The correct answer is C. Politely decline the student's request, explaining that providing specific details about the exam would compromise its fairness and integrity, and suggest that the student focus on general preparation using publicly available course outlines or recommended reading lists. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a student's desire for academic success and the university's commitment to academic integrity. The pressure to perform well in entrance exams can lead individuals to seek shortcuts, but such actions undermine the fairness and validity of the assessment process. Careful judgment is required to navigate this situation ethically and in accordance with university regulation. The correct approach involves recognizing the ethical implications of the student's request and upholding the principles of academic honesty. This means refusing to provide any unauthorized assistance or information that could compromise the integrity of the Alanus University entrance exam. The justification lies in the university's explicit guidelines and the broader ethical responsibility of educators and administrators to maintain a fair and equitable testing environment. Providing advance information about exam content or structure would violate the trust placed in the university by all applicants and current students, and it would contravene the spirit of a merit-based selection process. An incorrect approach would be to provide the student with specific details about the exam's format, question types, or subject matter. This action directly violates the principle of fairness by giving one applicant an unearned advantage over others. It also breaches the confidentiality expected of exam administrators and could lead to severe disciplinary action for both the student and the individual providing the information, including potential disqualification from the entrance process and damage to professional reputation. Another incorrect approach would be to offer vague hints or general advice that, while not directly revealing exam content, could still be interpreted as an attempt to guide the student towards specific areas of focus without proper justification. This blurs the line between legitimate guidance and unfair assistance, creating an ambiguous situation that still compromises the exam's integrity. It suggests a lack of commitment to the strict impartiality required in admissions processes. A third incorrect approach would be to ignore the student's request entirely without any form of response or guidance on appropriate conduct. While this avoids direct complicity, it fails to address the underlying issue of the student's intent and misses an opportunity to reinforce university standards. A more proactive stance, even in refusal, is professionally more sound. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a clear understanding of the university's academic integrity policy and entrance examination guidelines. When faced with a request that appears to compromise these standards, the professional should 1. Identify the potential ethical and regulatory conflict. 2. Consult relevant university policies and procedures. 3. Clearly and politely decline any request that violates these policies, explaining the rationale based on fairness and academic integrity. 4. If appropriate, redirect the student to legitimate resources for preparation, such as publicly available syllabi or general study advice that does not pertain to specific exam content. 5. Document the interaction if the request is particularly concerning or persistent. Question 20. Operational review demonstrates that the admissions committee is under pressure to meet enrollment targets for the upcoming academic year. The committee is considering streamlining the risk assessment process for applicants by focusing primarily on standardized test scores and previous academic GPA, with minimal qualitative review of personal statements or extracurricular activities. This is intended to expedite the decision-making process and increase the number of applications processed daily. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the principles of responsible university admissions and risk assessment within the Alanus University framework? Option A. Implement a multifaceted risk assessment that incorporates a balanced evaluation of quantitative data, GPA, test scores, and qualitative indicators, personal statements, essays, extracurricular achievements, and potentially interviews, with clear documentation of the rationale for each admission decision. Option B. Prioritize the processing speed of applications by relying solely on a narrow set of quantitative metrics, such as standardized test scores and GPA, to quickly identify potentially suitable candidates and minimize administrative burden. Option C. Focus the risk assessment on applicants who demonstrate exceptional performance in a limited number of high-profile extracurricular activities, assuming these individuals possess the necessary drive and capability for university success. Option D. Delegate the final admission decisions to a small subcommittee that relies on informal discussions and personal impressions of applicants, rather than a structured assessment framework, to expedite the process. The correct answer is A. Implement a multifaceted risk assessment that incorporates a balanced evaluation of quantitative data, GPA, test scores, and qualitative indicators, personal statements, essays, extracurricular achievements, and potentially interviews, with clear documentation of the rationale for each admission decision. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the university's operational efficiency with the integrity of its admissions process, particularly concerning the assessment of applicants' suitability for higher education. The pressure to meet enrollment targets can create a conflict of interest, potentially leading to compromises in the rigor of the risk assessment. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the assessment process remains objective, fair, and compliant with Alanus University's internal policies and any overarching educational regulatory guidelines that govern admissions. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented evaluation of each applicant's potential to succeed academically and contribute to the university community, based on a comprehensive set of criteria. This approach aligns with the ethical obligation to maintain academic standards and ensure that admitted students are well prepared for the demands of university-level study. It also supports the university's reputation for academic excellence. Regulatory compliance would necessitate adherence to any established university policies on admissions, which are designed to ensure fairness and prevent bias. An incorrect approach that prioritizes speed over thoroughness would fail to identify potential risks associated with certain applicants, such as a lack of foundational knowledge or potential academic struggles. This could lead to admitting students who are unlikely to succeed, resulting in higher dropout rates and a dilution of academic standards. Ethically, this is unsound as it misrepresents the university's commitment to student success. Another incorrect approach that focuses solely on quantitative metrics without considering qualitative factors would overlook crucial aspects of an applicant's profile, such as motivation, resilience, or unique experiences that could indicate future success. This approach risks creating a biased admissions process that favors certain types of applicants over others, potentially violating principles of fairness and equal opportunity. A third incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or personal biases rather than established assessment criteria would introduce subjectivity and inconsistency into the admissions process. This is a significant ethical and potential regulatory failure, as it undermines the credibility of the admissions decisions and could lead to discriminatory practices. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the university's stated admissions objectives and relevant policies. This involves identifying all relevant risk factors for student success and developing a standardized methodology for assessing them. The process should include mechanisms for review and appeal, ensuring transparency and fairness. Regular training on ethical admissions practices and risk assessment methodologies is crucial to maintain objectivity and prevent undue influence from external pressures.